On her birthday eve, I intended to arrange a surprise for my spouse. However, I stumbled upon a secret she had kept hidden for years instead. Upon revealing a tattoo from Blackridge Tattoo, she paled visibly. Now I knew everything about her, she acknowledged. It was a Friday night, and I was seated at my laptop, contemplating the upcoming birthday of my wife. As the deadline approached, I wanted to give her an extraordinary gift. 5 years ago, I assisted Vivian in opening her initial interior design studio. Later came two more, followed by a third. With time, it transformed into a prosperous network. I mostly kept away from her business dealings. When expansion was required, I'd add funds, but the daily operations were always handled by Vivian. Last year, I gifted her an exclusive designer chair from a renowned collection, and she was ecstatic. This time around, I decided to explore other items offered by the same supplier. As I scrolled through her purchase history on my laptop, I found her orders. In the list of typical expenses, textiles, top-tier furniture, construction fees stood alongside an anomaly. Tattoo studio equipment, chairs, professional tools, inks, totaling $21,840. This perplexed me as I scrutinized the screen. It was incongruous, a misclassified invoice, possibly, but it refused to escape my gaze. As far as I knew, Vivian had no affiliation with the tattoo business whatsoever. In our 5-year history, she had never hinted at it once. I found myself alone in a silent room, fixated on the blinking cursor. I sought an explanation. Vivian arrived home around 8, deposited her bag, discarded her shoes, commented about a demanding client and a long day, as usual. I waited until she poured herself a glass of wine and sat down. Then I inquired, "Hey, I saw in the purchase history there's a payment for tattoo studio equipment, around 20 grand or so. What gives?" She pondered momentarily before shrugging nonchalantly. "I can't recall." One of her business projects, possibly. We occasionally procure equipment via intermediaries for a client's renovation. She mentioned she'd look into it tomorrow. Soon after, she shifted to other topics, such as her sister's fall trip and ideas for her birthday. It seemed plausible. Her studios handled various commercial spaces. Perhaps indeed someone was opening a tattoo parlor and the order had been processed. Strange purchases happen regularly through businesses. I decided to let it be. We had dinner, watched something, and by bedtime I'd almost forgotten about it. But that brief pause lingered. The amount, around $20,000, was not easily forgotten. So once she fell asleep, I returned to the laptop and revisited that vendor. To my surprise, it wasn't just a single payment I saw, but multiple transactions. Initially, everything seemed normal, regular orders, invoices from contractors. However, I soon found an unusual pattern. The same company recurrently emerged in the records, with varying amounts each time, from a few thousand to slightly more. Individually, these payments appeared insignificant. Yet this realization struck me later, their ordinariness. I jotted them down on a clean sheet, one beneath the other, tracing back as far as the records reached. Upon totaling them up, I found myself in shock. Over the past 2 years, tens of thousands of dollars had been transferred to that single company, real money, money I had personally handed over. Each time she asked for more funds for the business, I never heard its name before, nor did it ever appear on a contract. Determined to find out more about this company, I conducted a search and found minimal information. There was no website, no reviews, no listing, and no photos of an office. For a company handling such large sums, the lack of information was almost startling. The registration traced to a residential area in the suburbs away from the city, not an office or showroom. The company owner listed was Vivian, separate from our shared accounts and the studios. This business, operated solely under her name, was something I had never heard her discuss, and it was apparently run from a house I had never seen before. I double-checked the address and jotted it down, keeping it in my pocket for days. All I could think about was this address. On Wednesday, I told Vivian I needed to visit a supplier in the suburbs. She barely glanced up, simply saying, "Drive safe." The location was approximately 40 minutes outside the city, and I anticipated finding an office or small warehouse. Instead, it was a house, spacious, modern, well-manicured landscaping, with a car parked in the driveway, no company signs, just a residential property. I parked a short distance away and slightly across the street, providing me a clear view without being too close. I had no specific plan. I merely wished to observe the location hidden behind the company Vivian had never mentioned. After approximately 20 minutes, the garage door lifted, and a man emerged. He was younger than me, around mid-30s, exuding an effortless sense of ownership and absence of urgency. He entered a pickup truck. As he reversed and passed by me, I noticed the logo on the door, Blackridge Tattoo. Instantly, I pulled out my phone to investigate. In just 2 minutes, I discovered that Blackridge Tattoo was a chain of tattoo studios with multiple locations, owned by a man named Ryan Blackridge. His photograph was displayed on their website. It was undeniably him, the man from the garage. At least one fact became clear: the tattoo equipment was not a mistake or misinterpretation. It existed, and somehow my wife was connected to the owner of this establishment. However, this revelation only sparked another, more troubling question. How was my wife linked to the man who owned it? The firm responsible was listed under my wife's name. She claimed she couldn't recall it. Upon driving home, I began to decipher the mystery, culminating in an answer. I arranged an appointment at one of Blackridge Tattoo studios. I specified I desired their top artist, Ryan Blackridge, personally. They informed me he rarely took on new clients but would make an exception for me. The appointment was scheduled for Friday afternoon. The studio was immaculate and well-lit, music faint, his artwork displayed prominently. He emerged, extending a hand as if we were longtime acquaintances. Prior to taking my seat, I surreptitiously activated the recorder on my phone and concealed it in my pocket. He showed no suspicion of this. He was easy to engage in conversation. As the needle worked, he disclosed all. He took pride in his achievements, new locations opening, business flourishing, ambitious plans for the upcoming year. I posed the sort of questions a casual observer might ask, and he filled in the blanks himself. He completed a place out of town as well, smiling while discussing work. He and his spouse had finally moved in. I maintained a steady tone, commenting that it sounded pleasant, and at that moment my gaze fell upon a photograph on the desk beside us. Bryant and Vivian, with arms around each other, stood in the doorway of that very house. The same house I'd parked opposite 3 days earlier. For a few seconds, I simply stared at it. "Is that her?" I inquired. He nodded, still smiling, needle continuing to move. "Yes, my wife." Unbeknownst to him, he had just revealed himself. He didn't notice the change in my expression. He remained unaware that the man sitting in his chair was Vivian's husband, a stranger now claiming her as his own. A few minutes later, I paid, thanked him, and left. I returned home a different man than the one who had departed before. For some time, I sat in my truck in my own driveway, replaying it over and over again. The photo, the doorway, my wife. It wasn't a hypothesis anymore. It was simply the truth. It was time to respond, but cautiously. Aware of the consequences if I acted hastily, as soon as Vivian discovered my knowledge, she would gain an advantage. She could have days, possibly only hours, to subtly rearrange things, withdraw funds, erase all traces. I wasn't going to let her take that opportunity. Instead, I sought the right professionals, lawyers familiar with such situations. We needed to uncover and secure those hidden assets before she even suspected anything. Quick, quiet, without any fuss. All I wanted was what I had been financing with my own money for years back. A week later, everything happened at once. No warning. On a Tuesday morning, the house in Bend and Ryan Studios were frozen, secured tightly. No one could access them. The accounts associated with that second business froze simultaneously. Everything they'd constructed together, still within reach the day before, suddenly became out of bounds for both of them. I was at home when it happened. I had taken the day off. Made a cup of coffee, anticipating the call. Arrived slightly before 10 a.m., the tone in Vivian's voice gave it away. "The studio accounts are locked," she explained. "Nothing is functioning." "What's going on?" I replied calmly, instructing her to return home. Upon arrival, she was pale, half her coat off, still clinging to her phone as if it might miraculously function again. "Vivian, what's happening? Speak to me." I remained seated in the same chair all morning. Calm, having had a week to prepare for this eventuality. She, however, had only an hour. "I am familiar with Vivian," I said. "I am aware of everything." She froze, perfectly still, as if the floor had shifted beneath her. I then rose slowly and revealed my sleeve tattoo from Ryan Blackridge. The hue drained from her complexion, vanishing in an instant. She scrutinized the tattoo on my forearm as though it were a mirage. Despite our dialogue, I explained. "Consider this." I activated the audio on my phone. Ryan's voice echoed through the room, reassuring, confident. He discussed the expanding chain of studios, upcoming locations, and his latest project out of town. "My woman," he declared. They had finally moved in together. The tone of his voice reverberated throughout our living space as he talked about Vivian. Her lips quivered as she listened to him discuss her affairs. I allowed the recording to continue for a few more seconds before silencing it. I instructed someone to investigate the studios, I said. 2 years, Vivian. For 2 years, you've moved my funds, bought that house, established a second company under your name, and opened tattoo studios for the man you're sleeping with. Each time you claimed it was for business purposes, you were constructing another life behind my back. She began to argue, stating I had misunderstood, offering an explanation, asserting if only I would listen. No, I said firmly. I stood outside your house. I spotted a picture of both of you on his desk. Now I can't trust a thing you say. She slumped into a chair as if her legs had given way. You utilized everything. I said my faith, my affection, my assets. Not once did you hesitate when demanding more. You faced me and asked for payment towards the home where you'd reside with him. She remained silent. I persisted. It's finalized. The house, studios, accounts were all sealed this morning. Therefore, there's no way to transfer assets to Ryan. You won't have access to any of it. And I filed. The divorce papers will be delivered soon. I rose and departed. The ensuing events were calmer and quieter than people often imagine. There was no heated argument, no dramatic court scene like in the movies. My attorneys clearly presented all financial details, where the money originated, where it went, and whose name appeared on everything in between. It wasn't complicated once laid bare. I had financed everything myself, as the records showed. In the end, events unfolded precisely as they had been predicted. The house in Bend and the entire Blackridge Tattoo chain, purchased with my funds, were returned to me. On paper, the joint venture Vivian and Ryan had nurtured now belonged to a husband neither of them anticipated. I had no intention of occupying that house or managing tattoo studios. I harbored no interest in being part of their envisioned life. Consequently, I placed everything on the market, the house, the studios, every asset. I wasn't seeking ownership of their dream. I merely wanted my investment returned, and then I wanted it eliminated. It was gradually sold over the ensuing months. I didn't attend a single property showing. I delegated the closings to lawyers and monitored the return of funds, one transaction at a time, into accounts that were mine exclusively again. Strangely enough, I experienced little emotion watching it transpire. I had anticipated feelings, perhaps contentment or fury, gradually subsiding. Instead, it was mostly silence, a restoration to the way things should have been from the start. Meanwhile, in Bend, an unoccupied house with a sign in its yard and her name no longer adorning any item within, I severed all ties with Vivian, yet not abruptly. For some time, she persisted. She'd call, text, visit, hoping to converse, to mend things, to restart. One more opportunity, she proposed. We could start anew. It was revealed that Ryan vanished the instant the house, studios, and funds disappeared. She disclosed this herself, seated at my kitchen table one last time. As soon as there was nothing left to sustain him, he departed. He hadn't been creating a life with her, rather constructing his own on her foundation, manipulating her, and beneath her, me, a young man with an appealing grin. And she had given him everything right up until there was nothing more to give. After returning empty-handed, she approached me again, not because of any shift in her feelings towards me, but simply due to lack of other options. I listened to her, and what struck me was the absence of anger or bitterness within myself, no urge to prove myself or inflict pain. Across the table, I saw a stranger, someone with whom I had shared a home for 17 years, yet was completely unknown to me. I expressed this sentiment directly, without speeches or blame. I acknowledged that any remnants of the weeds had vanished, that I no longer felt anger, and requested her not to return. I then asked her to depart. The divorce proceeded swiftly with minimal dispute. There was little left for contention, as she had effectively handled it herself, long before I discovered the first mysterious payment. We never crossed paths again, and I refrained from seeking her out. On a typical Monday morning, I resumed my work at the office, just as before. The house was peaceful, now truly mine. For the first time in years, every penny I earned was contributing to my own existence, not someone else's. The episode concluded. I trust this tale didn't elicit apathy from you. What's your perspective on whether Russ treated Vivian justly or overstepped? Express your thoughts below. Subscribe for a tale that will astound you further in the next installment.